If you're planning to go to the University of Warwick next year, this video will help you choose your perfectly suited on-campus accommodation. Hi, I'm Navya. I'm currently a second year at the University of Warwick, and if you do find this video helpful, please consider subscribing because it would help me out so much. I will be talking about the factual stuff while also talking about my opinions, so do consider that I might have my own biases when you're choosing your accommodation. Another thing to note is that prices will usually change almost every year, so depending on what year you've applied for, do check out the university website to check their prices. Another thing that does change quite often as well is the let for every accommodation. For example, last year my best friend lived in Vick and she had to move out during Easter, but this year the let includes Easter, so you don't have to move out. Now, one of the most important factors that most of you will be thinking about before you choose your accommodation is the toilets. I'm going to be so honest, sharing a toilet really isn't all that bad. I feel like when you are living at home, you might be choosing to stay in the toilet for longer to have some privacy. But now that you're living alone, you won't need that in the toilet. You have your room for your own privacy. If you think you would use the toilet for its basic main purpose, then honestly, it's really not that bad. However, do take into consideration that last year I lived in Claycroft, which was a shared ensuite. I shared a toilet with only one other person and she had to be female. Although we were not friends, we did keep the toilet clean enough, so it doesn't mean having a shared toilet is going to be perfect, but I do think it's worth on saving the cost if that's something you're interested in. If you are super picky about this, the ensuites are Vick, Jack Martin, Lakeside, Sherbourne, Heronbank, Cryfield, Townhouses, Westwood and Bluebell. The only shared ensuite on campus is Claycroft, and the ones with shared toilets are Roots, Tocil and Cryfield Standard. Another thing I do want to talk about in this video is how social your flat might be. However, another disclaimer is it will be different if it's an only girls flat or a co-ed flat. So there are a lot of things to consider. I will show you pictures and videos of all these accoms while I'm talking about them, and yes, it might feel like an important decision, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You can be unlucky in an accom that you thought was lucky, or lucky in an accom that you thought was bad. And choosing the right accommodation doesn't mean you're guaranteed to be friends with your flatmates versus not be friends with your flatmates. And from someone whose flatmates were friendly, but none of us were friends last year, I've been able to find a social life in my second year. It's actually so overwhelming now. So it isn't be all or end all. So the first one I'm going to start with is Claycroft. I might be slightly biased about this because I lived there last year and I thought it was really decent. I was barely ever in my room until term 3 in first year, but even then, not so much. So honestly, I didn't really worry about how it looked. None of my flatmates were friends and we were 8 people. However, I do know of flats who did end up being friends in Claycroft, so again, it's all different experiences. My favorite part about Claycroft was the location. I honestly could roll out of bed 5 minutes before lectures and still make it on time. It was also very close to Aldi, which I preferred over Tesco because Aldi's just a bit further and much more cheaper. So if you're living in Claycroft, it's not that big of a deal for you to go to Aldi compared to Tesco. You also had the Claycroft fields right behind, which had a park, some swings and a little bit of an open gym. It was a nice place to have picnics during summer, and if not, just go on walks. Technically, it also can get you to the Tocil Nature Reserve. However, it was shut when I lived there, so I was never able to actually go through. But the Nature Reserve is technically right behind it as well. I'm almost fully sure that the kitchen was like the smallest one of all the accoms on campus, but that's because you share a kitchen with only 8 people, plus you're paying for the shared ensuite, which is actually a great bargain compared to having a bigger kitchen. Sharing a toilet was no problem at all because the cleaners come every single week, even if there is some issue. And if you are sharing with more than just one other person, you will also have someone come and clean the toilets every single day. Something people don't realize is it's actually harder to keep an ensuite clean because you're the only one using it, so you don't clean it and no one else is going to come and clean it for you. I'd say their rooms were actually slightly bigger than what I saw in Vick because we don't have an ensuite, so you get more space. While for example, in Vick, part of the room is taken just for the toilet. One thing to note is that you do have a single bed, while some other accoms will have slightly bigger than a single bed. However, it wasn't really a problem for me because if anyone did come over, I would just get the airbed out. I will also put up the contract let date, the start date, the price per week and the price per year right here for all the accoms because I do think they do usually change every single year, so do check them out on the website and don't just take my word for this. The next one I'm going to talk about is Tocil. most people that I knew from Tocil were actually quite friendly and close with their flatmates. You will probably find a mix of different kinds of people, but I do think that you're more likely to find friends in a flat with more people compared to a flat with 8 people. This is just something that I think, so don't take my word for it, but I do think that if you have more people in the flat, there are more personalities to actually have the chance of getting along compared to a smaller number like 8 where it's more difficult. But there are exceptions. I do know of flats with 8 people that were still friends. So if you're just really obsessed with having a social life, then it might be something to consider. The location of Tocil is great. It's right next to Claycroft and close to Arthur Vick. It's very, very close to Central Campus, not too far from Aldi and Tesco again. And you have the Tocil roundabout, which is filled with bunnies and deers most of the time, which is just cute to see. I have, however, heard about rats being in the accoms, so watch out. But if you're big on saving and sharing a toilet isn't that bad, it's actually a pretty decent choice of accom because it's more important to find the right people in your first year so you might be able to live with them in your second year if that's what you want. However, if you're going to under or over your budget, do know that they will probably be looking for similarly priced places in their second years as well. You tend to share a kitchen with up to 12 people. However, there is a 1 in 3 chance that you will be allocated to a 6 people flat instead of a 12. The top floor flats will have 6 people sharing a kitchen while the bottom and middle floor will have 12 people. In the top floor, you will get 2 bathrooms, a shower bathroom with a toilet and a bathroom with a toilet. And for the 12 people flats, you get 3. So even if you're against a shared toilet, know that you won't just have 1 toilet for everyone to share in any accom. Tocil is also again a single bed, and I will put up the details of the prices right here. The next one is Arthur Vick. My best friend lived here last year, so I spent a lot of time in their kitchens and accom. They have a large kitchen with the sofa area, and for most of the flats that I knew, someone always bought a TV, and almost all of them had bought air fryers there as well. The people are so incredibly nice. I think you get the most diverse range of friends in this one, but it is slightly pricey. Most people in these flats end up being friends with at least 1 person in their flat, and this tends to have a higher chance because there are 14 people sharing the kitchen. They're all en suite, and this one actually has a bigger bed. You get almost a double bed, and the location again is pretty decent. It's closer towards Central Campus, just a bit further from Tesco and Aldi, but it's still very central. Jack Martin is very similar to Arthur Vick, but slightly cheaper because it's single beds. It's slightly closer to campus and a bit further from Aldi and Tesco, however still very central again. You share a kitchen with 13 people, and most of the things that I said about Arthur Vick are pretty similar to Jack Martin. I do have quite a few girlfriends who lived in only girls accoms in first year, and one of my friends lived in Jack Martin in an only girls flat and ended up moving out with some of them for second year. The next one is Cryfield Standard. Now for reference, I haven't actually been to all the accommodation. I lived in Claycroft, I've been to Arthur Vick, I've been to Bluebell, I've been to Lakeside, I've been to Sherbourne, and I've been to Cryfield Standard. The only reason I had been to Cryfield Standard was because of a side quest in Freshers Week where I went out with a couple of girls and a few of us wanted to go to the toilet really urgently. So one of the guys we were with offered to let us into their flat and use the toilet. I've seen the toilets and I've kind of seen the kitchen as well. This was the only time I had seen a shared toilet situation, and I thought it was actually quite clean. There was more than 1 cubicle, so it seemed very accessible. However, the corridors were quite small in their accom, but that's not really a big deal, I guess. They did have a really nice kitchen interior from the one that I had been to, and they have access to all the Cryfield Village social spaces. Now, the Cryfield Village social spaces tend to include a dance room, a music room, and a cinema room. They have a large communal space with each Cryfield Standard block. You'll be sharing a kitchen with 14 people, so again, higher chances getting along well. I haven't heard much problems from this. The Cryfield Village is located on the other side compared to Claycroft, Arthur Vick, Tocil, and Jack Martin, and in the middle tends to be Bluebell. Lakeside, Sherbourne, and Heronbank are way further, and Westwood is just really in the middle of nowhere, but in the direction of Tesco. It isn't exactly located in central campus. It's very close to the piazza, but it really depends on where your lectures are going to be. Based on the course you're doing, you might have buildings on this side or you might have buildings somewhere in the central, while Cryfield Village will be here. Now, most of my lectures tended to be there or central, which is basically where it can be, and those were way closer. At most, getting to your lectures maximum will be a 15 to 20 minute walk. Like I said, I don't think it's that far from central, but it is way further from Tesco. You get a single bed, and again, details right here. The next one I'm going to talk about is Cryfield Apartments. You do get a small double bed. It is quite pricey, but again, you get all the perks of the Cryfield Village social spaces. You get an ensuite, and it's just way more bougie. Most of the other things are very similar to Cryfield Standard because they're all located in the same area. However, this time you share a kitchen with 12 people instead of 14 like Cryfield Standard. The next one is Cryfield Townhouses. Now, I don't really know much about this one either, but I did meet one person who lived there, and that was pretty much it. It is in the middle of Cryfield Standard and Cryfield Apartments in price. You get a small double bed, and again, everything else is the same. I do think the location you live in tends to attract where you're going to make friends. For example, I don't know many people in Cryfield Village. However, I do know most people who lived in Claycroft, Tocil, Vick or Jack Martin. I do know more people in Lakeside, Sherbourne and Heronbank as well compared to this side of campus. So yeah, that's as much as I can tell you about Cryfield Village Accoms. One thing I do want to mention is all the Cryfield apartment Accoms are located in Gibbet Hill, very close to the bus stop by Warwick. And the next one I'm going to talk about is Bluebell. Now, I have been to Bluebell and I do have a lot of opinions about it. It's an ensuite, it's on central campus, you get a small double bed. It's definitely the most expensive accommodation on campus. This is also why it tends to attract a lot of internationals, although the friend that I knew over there wasn't an international. Funnily enough, it's located right opposite Roots, which is the cheapest accommodation on campus other than Whitefield, which doesn't really exist anymore. It tends to have a lot of security in terms of its accommodation. You have to have the key to get into the accom, and then you need a key to get into the flat again, a key to get into the kitchen and your room. It's not very open in the way to socialize with other flats as compared to any of the other accoms. However, I do see that internationals like hanging out with internationals, so they do get along better if that's something you want. You have 8 people sharing a kitchen, and although it looks really bougie from outside with the colorful lights, honestly, I don't see the worst. It's not that much bigger than Claycroft. You do just get a bigger bed. But yes, people who do choose Bluebell tend to choose it for the international community, or the notion that if you pay more, you're getting better. But honestly, I don't think that's true. The next one I'm going to talk about is Roots. Now, something I didn't know up until making this video is that Roots actually has the option to have a small standard room or a standard room. The only difference is the small standard is just a smaller room, so you pay lesser and you save on rent. You share a kitchen with 18 people, and these are the most sociable flats on campus. They're having flat parties all the time. The fire alarms are constantly going off, and they're having a lot of fun. If you're someone who doesn't like socializing, do not choose Roots. I actually chose it as my 6th option, but I got lucky enough to get my 1st. If you do like your privacy and don't like socializing or drinking or going out as much, don't choose Roots. If you really badly want a social life, choose Roots. I have not met anyone who lived in Roots who didn't like going out. You will probably end up with a lot of hilarious stories from the end of your first year if you live there, but I guess that's part of the uni experience if that's what you want. The next ones I'm going to talk about is the Lakeside Village ones, starting with Lakeside. Like Cryfield Village, there are 3 accoms in Lakeside Village, which includes Lakeside, Heronbank and Sherbourne. All of them are en suites, except Lakeside has a bigger bed, which is a small double bed. All 3 of them are very close to the sports hub, but slightly far from everything else. It's a 20-minute walk to Central Campus, and from there, it's like another 10-minute walk to Tesco and Aldi. So most people who live here tend to opt for grocery delivery services or have to do a huge food shop once every month. Now, you might think it's beneficial to be really close to the sports hub if you enjoy sports. I personally do. However, a lot of sports actually happen in the Westwood Sports Centre, which is a bit far from campus, a bit towards the left from Tesco and Aldi. I just checked and it's like a 20-minute walk to the Westwood Sports Centre. There's a good split of sports that happen in the Westwood Sports Centre versus the Sports Hub. So check out which sports you might want to do and make sure you're not living too far off from the right sport. For example, tennis happens in the Westwood Tennis Centre while basketball happens in the Sports Hub. There are 8 people who share a kitchen. One thing to know about Lakeside, Sherbourne and Heronbank is that it's a very pretty area. They've got a lake and a lot of geese all around, a lot of greenery, and it is quite a quiet area. I do think that people who choose these accoms tend to like keeping to themselves as well. Sherbourne will probably be the most social of the 3. It really depends on what you consider socializing. If it's drinking, roots. If it's more of quiet socializing, maybe consider other things. It is obviously not as lively as Central Campus, but it has got its own perks. Sherbourne is pretty much everything similar to Lakeside except that it's got a single bed and you share a kitchen with 12 people, so I do think that these ones tend to be more social compared to Lakeside and Heronbank. Heronbank also all similar to Lakeside. You share a kitchen with 8 people, however in this one you have a single bed. The last one I'm going to talk about is the Westwood Accoms. They are the furthest from campus, around a 30-minute walk, and it's basically like living off campus. One great perk is that they're very close to the Westwood Sports Centre, basically right next to it, and it depends what sports you're playing, it'll be very easy to get there. However, there is like one kitchen for 80 people. I'm not completely sure about this, but this is what I've heard, so I'll just put up the details right here if I'm wrong. Similar to the Cryfield Village facilities, they have a cinema room and some lounge areas. So they do have actually got great facilities, except the fact that it's pretty far from campus. It's not too far from Tesco and Aldi actually. However, did I mention it's pretty far from campus? You do get en-suites and a single bed, and did I mention it's really far from campus? No, but in all honesty, it is actually convenient to make friends because you do tend to make friends in the same accom. And although it's far from campus, it's like a 25-30 minute walk. So honestly, if you just leave on time, you will get there on time. I did actually meet someone who lived in Westwood in my first ever lecture, and she showed up to almost every lecture, so it's completely possible to actually show up. The last one I want to talk about is Westwood Small Double. This is literally the exact same as Westwood Single, except now you get a small double bed. So the rent is slightly higher, but it still is an ensuite. And everything else is the exact same thing. I'll put up the details right here. So that's it. Those are all the accommodations on Warwick campus. I hope this video was helpful and I hope you end up choosing an accommodation that suits your needs, and I hope you have a great first year. And even if you don't, join a society. Saved me so much of lacking the social life in second year. It's not the end of the world if you don't get the accommodation you want. If you have any other worries, I recommend you check out my other video about how to survive first year, because I wish I had known this before I actually went to university. It would have saved me so much of having to self-learn things myself. Hopefully you found this video helpful and I've convinced you to subscribe. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.